Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, I realize that we don't cover a lot of War of 1812 content on this channel, and I'd like to change that. It's a war I need to learn more about, and I'm excited to be able to dive into a video today from the channel called Uncovered. It's called The Battle of New Orleans. New Orleans is how a lot of people say it. Jackson's masterpiece. It's a documentary. It's going to show some maps and things like that. Last summer, I had the chance to visit the Chalmette battlefield. It's not really, we call it the Battle of New Orleans, but it actually took place outside of New Orleans, a place called Chalmette Plantation. And so it's the Chalmette battlefield. It's a very interesting battlefield, and like a lot of battlefields, your understanding of what happened there is greatly amplified when you visit. And going to this battlefield, it becomes clear pretty quickly why it was such a one-sided affair, why Andrew Jackson and the American forces were able to win such a stunning victory weeks after the war had officially come to an end. So I'll put the link down in the description. You can check it out without my commentary, see what else Uncovered has to offer. This one came out about a month ago. Let's go ahead and dive in.
On the morning of January 8, 1815, 5 miles south of New Orleans, Major General Sir Edward Pakenham ordered his 8,000-strong army to attack the war-hardened American forces of General Andrew Jackson. Jackson, who declared martial law in the city of New Orleans, enlisted any able-bodied man he could find, including local businessmen, freed slaves, Choctaw Indians, and even Bayou pirates. The War of 1812, which had been going for almost 3 years by this point, was a stalemate, as neither the British or Americans had achieved a decisive victory by this point. However,
So let's talk a little bit about Andrew Jackson up to this point, right? So he is the last American president who actually was a veteran of the American Revolution. He was a teenager during the Revolution, a very famous incident where he's supposed to be shining a British officer's shoes, and the officer hits him with the flat of his sword and supposedly leaves a scar on him, and kind of just left him hating the British, is what they say. He goes out to Tennessee. He was born in the Carolinas. We still don't really know for sure if he was born in North or South Carolina. He was born in an area called the Waxhaws, which is kind of in between the two. And so he goes out to Tennessee. He becomes I think a judge for a while. He is elected to the Senate. He ends up being made the head of the Tennessee militia, where he narrowly won a vote for that position over Governor Sevier, and then they end up like impugning each other's character, and I think Sevier says some stuff about Jackson's wife, and they get into a shootout in the street. Jackson's in a number of duels. He takes some bullets that hit his body, and he kills some people, gets into brawls, fistfights. He's a fighter. That's who he is. And so during the War of 1812, he's mostly been fighting in the southwest of what is then the United States. So we're talking Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, western Florida. Eventually gets command of that area, and so New Orleans is part of his area of responsibility.
British were one victory away from capturing the vital port city of New Orleans, which would give the British significant control of the Mississippi River and hinder America's westward expansion. On Christmas Eve 1814, in the Belgian city of Ghent, a treaty was struck between the United Kingdom and the United States of America to end the War of 1812. However, this news would not reach the United States for another 6 weeks,
And just because it reaches the United States does not mean it reaches New Orleans, because, if it, say, reaches Washington, it's not like word travels in a day or two to New Orleans from there.
Which meant the war would continue to rage on. The British Navy had moved its focus to capturing the city of New Orleans, which served as an essential trading port at the mouth of the Mississippi. The British Navy sent 60 ships with 14,450 soldiers on board, under the command of Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane. British forces arrived at Villers Plantation on December 23, 1814, from a shallow bayou in the bordering swamps.
So that's a significant number of troops. 14,000 doesn't sound like a lot to us today, but at this time in this place, during this war, that's a significant body of troops. That tells you the British are really, really serious about taking New Orleans because they understand its importance. And they're thinking, remember, this is right in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. This is just after Napoleon's been defeated and exiled, so you got this little bit of downtime. So these are troops that have been freed up from the fighting in Europe, and this is before Napoleon's going to make his return in the spring of that year.
Jacques Valère was chased out of his plantation and alerted Jackson of the British arrival. Jackson, enraged by this apparent blunder, immediately rallied his troops to face the British force. That very evening, Jackson led 2,131 troops to face the British in a sneak attack. British forces, cooking their dinner over blazing fires, were completely unsuspecting of an American incursion, when at that moment, the USS Carolina began launching deadly volleys on the British camp. American infantry, freed blacks, and Creole militia rushed down the Levee Road, while Coffee's hardened veterans moved through a swamp to outflank the British.
I was going to say, this entire area that you're looking at here near the Mississippi River, this is kind of the floodplain of the Mississippi River, which means when the river rises, it's all underwater. And so this is it's a very high water table. You're often looking at ground that is soaking wet. When we were there in this area, it was like you could walk in certain areas and you could just see the water sitting there. And so this is a place where your feet are going to sink down 6-8 inches probably when you're marching on it, if not more.
The skirmish was initially well organized, but darkness and gun smoke caused mass confusion between the opposing forces, and the fight was quickly engulfed in hand-to-hand brutality. By midnight, the American attack had decimated the unsuspecting British camp. Noticing more British troops arriving through the bayou and unable to spare any manpower losses, Jackson withdrew his forces to the Rodriguez Canal, a 20-foot wide muddy ditch bordering the Chalmette plantation. The Americans had won this initial incursion, suffering 24 killed and 115 wounded. British losses were tallied at 46 killed and 167 wounded. Perhaps more important was the change of momentum. General Keane initially expected to take New Orleans with ease, but Jackson proved that it would be extremely hard. Watching the British fortify their position, Jackson ordered his men to do the same at the Rodriguez Canal. And
this is a brilliant spot to set up your defense. You've got everything you could ask for, especially if you're potentially facing larger numbers, which the British have a lot of troops available to them if they bring them all to bear. So I'll show you some images of this area when we get that far, but the Rodriguez Canal is a perfect place to build a defensive line. You've got the Mississippi River anchoring your right. You're going to have woods anchoring your left. It's a beautiful place with an open field of fire in front of you. If you're choosing a battlefield, this is the place you choose.
By the end of December 24th, Jackson had formed a line extending 600 yards from the Mississippi to the nearby swamps. On Christmas Day, Major General Sir Edward Pakenham arrived at the British encampment, trapped between the Mississippi River, an impossible swamp, and Jackson's heavily fortified line.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's stupidity to launch an attack here if you're Pakenham. You've got to be smarter than this. You're going up against ragtag militia under a guy who has not had formal military training. And are not as well equipped as you probably are, and not as well trained as you are, and you're going to march right into his killing zone for him?
Furthermore, the Americans had a vitally placed cannon battery on the western side of the Mississippi River. These cannons were placed perpendicularly to destroy a potential British advance on the Rodriguez Canal. Over the following days, Pakenham tenaciously deliberated with his generals on a battle plan that could surpass the American defenses, and by January 7th, 1815, he was ready to give battle.
I honestly think this is hubris on Pakenham's part. This is a British general believing that this ragtag American militia is no match for him and his professional soldiers, and he marches them to their doom.
Send his most aggressive colonel, William Thornton, with approximately 1,400 men across the Mississippi River to engage and capture the American cannons by daybreak. Once he would capture these guns, he would then focus them on Jackson's line. Major General John Keane would lead infantry along the river to draw as much American fire as possible.
So think about this. What does this plan depend on? It depends on taking those guns on the other side of the river. You don't do that this whole thing's a nightmare because those guns are then trained on you. So I can see the scenario where he believes that this is a winnable battle if they're able to take those guns. But you've got to have some way of knowing you took those guns before you dive into this fight.
Second in command, Major General Samuel Gibbs would lead the main assault on the Rodriguez Canal with 2,100 men. Simultaneously with Gibbs' advance, one of Pakenham's black regiments was ordered to draw Coffey's men into the Cypress Swamp. Major General John Lambert was to command the reserves of the British Army. On midnight, January 8, 1815, under a dense cloud of fog, the British assault on New Orleans began. Colonel Thornton commanded his troops to begin crossing the Mississippi River. However, things began to go awry for the British almost immediately. The dam that was supposed to transfer the British crossing boats into the Mississippi collapsed, delaying the British crossing to the western bank. The collapse resulted in Thornton only being able to ferry 450 of the planned 1,500 men to the other side of the river. To make things worse, Thornton did not factor the current of the Mississippi River, which resulted in his forces landing an additional 1,000 yards away from the American battery.
This is all setting it up to be a nightmare. I mean, if you're Pakenham at this point, you've got to adjust your plans. But how much of this is even being communicated?
Time Thornton had finally crossed the river, it was nearly dawn. On the eastern bank of the Mississippi,
He was supposed to have taken the guns by dawn, and he's just now getting across the river.
British 44th Regiment, tasked with carrying the breaching ladders for the attack, had forgotten them. General Gibbs, furious at this extreme lack of preparation, yelled for the ladders to be retrieved, but it was too late. Pakenham anxiously awaited Thornton's signal to press his assault, but as dawn neared, the signal never came. Pakenham had a decision to make. He could press his advance forward under the cover of fog, risking decimation if the fog lifted, or he could call off the attack. Anxious and fed up with
Call off the attack.
Pakenham pressed his attack. The British advance started out quite smoothly. The entire attacking army was concealed from the Americans by the fog. Behind the Rodriguez Canal, Jackson knew the British were advancing from the sound of the British drums behind the curtain of the mist.
We're going to hide behind the fog, but let's play our drums to announce our advance to everyone.
Jackson sternly ordered his troops to keep their heads down until he gave the order. The British moved closer and closer to the American line. Suddenly, the thick curtain of fog pulled back instantly.
This is what happens. How many times in your own life have you seen fog when you get up in the morning? The sun comes up and it burns that fog away, and almost instantly it clears up.
Coats of the British Army immediately stood out in the open fields of Chalmette Plantation. At that exact moment, the Americans opened fire. Gibbs' advance was hit extremely hard, and without the ladders he needed to cross the canal, the British were sitting ducks.
And let me show you what this field looks like and what the British were facing. So this is the Chalmette battlefield. The canal is right here. So this is your American line is just in between this road here and the canal, which is right here. This is the defensive line. The monument and the National Cemetery. National Cemetery is over in these woods over here. And there you have the Beauregard House, which is actually a relative. I think it maybe is one of the sons of General Beauregard from the Civil War. I've got a Freedmen's Cemetery back here. You got the National Cemetery. Oh, and the National Cemetery is back over here. That's right. So the British are marching this way from kind of right to left as we're looking at it. And let's take a look, first of all, at what the field looks like that the British are marching through. Now, you can't see it here, but this is swampland. I mean, this isn't just a nice flat grass. This is, if it rains a little bit, this is all mud, and you're marching through it. And that's what the British are facing. They're not able to run across this field. It's just not passable in that way. So now let me take you over here and show you what the defensive line is going to look like for the Americans. So here you have the defensive line that they've got built. You've got a few of the cannons set up, and it's just this long fence, and they're sitting behind it. And right in front of this little levee here where the fence is built is the canal. So I don't know if we can see the canal from here or not, but you can kind of see where it is. The canal's right here down in front. And so you've got this beautiful open field of fire for the Americans to just pick their targets. They've got cannon. Let's see if we can get a good look right here and show you what the field looks like. So there again, there's the defensive line. The Americans are behind this. The British are completely out in the open, marching across this open field. You could not pick a better battlefield if you're the Americans.
The British scored an unlikely victory on the Mississippi River bank, as Colonel Robert Rennie captured an unfortified redoubt. Rennie expected Keene's forces to rush up and reinforce him. However, Keene observed the vast devastation of the 44th Regiment on the British right and angled his 93rd Highlanders Division to assist General Gibbs. Gibbs, now fuming with anger after losing nearly all of his 21st and 44th Regiment, rode up to reorganize his troops. At the same time, Keene, who was advancing with his 93rd Highlanders, was struck in the groin and badly wounded. A few brave members of Gibbs' advance made it across the Rodriguez Canal, but either way,
really impressive to me, and tells you the determination and the skill of the British soldiers that any of them made it that far.
Killed or captured. Moments later, Gibbs was shot in the head and body and died on the field. Pakenham rode up to take control of what was left of his army after witnessing the slaughter unfold.
And this is a situation where I often wonder with Pakenham, and you've seen this in other situations where a general orders an ill-fated attack, or his men are just being destroyed, and he just rides into it himself, and he wants to die with his men, so to speak. And it makes me wonder if that's what happened with Pakenham here. I can't believe he would ride up so recklessly unless he really just expected what was going to happen.
To the now disheveled 93rd Highlanders Division and rallied them forward. But before he could move far, Pakenham was shot in the knee and spine, critically wounding him. Before he passed away, he ordered General John Lambert to advance his reserves. In the captured redoubt, Rennie led a final assault of what was left of his infantry and was instantly shot dead. On the
Every one of these British leaders is being taken down.
Mississippi, Thornton had finally reached the American battery. He ordered a bayonet charge of his 450 men against the 1,000 American defenders and routed them. Thornton would be able to...
if the plan had gone the way it was supposed to, if Thornton with over 1,000 men of his own, more than twice what he actually charged with, had gone in, they would have taken the position, at least temporarily. Now he's going to have to hold it. Eventually the Americans are going to calm down, they're going to regroup, and they're going to come back, and they outnumber him 2-1 here. But this shows you that the plan could have worked if it would have gone the way it was supposed to.
Quickly reactivate the captured batteries, but he was too late for his success to have any impact. By the time Thornton took out the American batteries, the entire British command structure had been incapacitated. Lambert and his reserves had watched half of the British attacking force get mowed down, and their morale was at a breaking point. Lambert discussed shortly with Admiral Cochrane at a plantation house, and ordered Thornton's men to withdraw from the eastern bank. Andrew Jackson, realizing his forces would have been easily devastated, eagerly accepted Lambert's ceasefire. The battle was disastrous for the British, suffering 828 killed and near 2,500 wounded, with approximately half of the wounded needing amputations. Jackson's men only suffered 8 killed and 14 wounded.
We're talking 3,000 casualties against 22? That's how ill-advised this attack was. Unbelievable.
A massive disparity in casualties was nearly unheard of, and with no chance of launching a second assault, the British withdrew their forces from New Orleans, ending the last major battle of the War of 1812.
And crazily, it didn't even really matter all that much because the war was already over because of the Treaty of Ghent. So it makes me wonder sometimes, had the war continued on, would this have mattered? I don't know, because once the British were freed up from fighting Napoleon, they could have brought a lot more forces to bear, and I don't know that it would have gone much better for the Americans after this. So let me know your thoughts. Looks like he's got one about Custer's last stand. We've done some stuff related to that before, but that might be an interesting one to take a look at. So let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.